So when we work with clients to sell their businesses, we as a team, we kind of sit back before we get into the deal process and try to anticipate, where the pain points are going to be from a seller perspective, buyer perspective. So we are in a position to help negotiate those items. So we kind of do the calculus. So we're ready to go, but every deal is different. And even though you think you got to kind of figure it out, there's always a surprise. Something from quote unquote under the table comes up. Hi, I'm kdee, President of Osage Advisors. Welcome back to the ins and outs of selling a business and this week's big hurdle. So we're working with a client right now, and it's been a deep dive in due diligence. Things are going well, and we got some great news that the quality of earnings, the testing of the financials, came out better than expected, right? That the numbers, the sales, the EBITDA profitability was better than expected, in the range we're looking for. We're really excited. And I said, that's great. But then the buyer says, we have one issue. I said, okay. And here we go. I said, well, we're concerned that the customer concentration is creeping up, that the one key customer that was X percent is now Y percent. And we need some protection on how we're going to protect ourselves if this customer either leaves or revenues significantly decrease. So here we are. So they're proposing a kind of like a secondary note that would be kind of tied into or contingent on that this customer or revenue, a combination of revenue and the customer would both stay the same over a 2-year period. And so if concentration increased by Y, if revenues decreased by X, either or, that you would lose the whole second note. And we're like, never seen that before, and that doesn't work for our client. Now, if you're an owner, and this happens a lot, and you're not represented by someone like Osage Advisors, the buyer would come through. You're deep in due diligence. They think they got you on the hook. There's a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. You want to close, and all of a sudden the buyer hits you with a retrade. We call them. They want to renegotiate the deal based on whatever. It may be a point where you're just saying, we're done, right? Get out. We're done. We'll move on. You just spent 9 months a year. You spent a lot of money and said, you know what? Now I'm going to go out and hire an advisor and do it the right way, right? Someone that's going to look out for my interest and make sure I get the deal that works for me. In this case, our client's represented by us. So I called the buyer and I said, look, I'd like to have a conversation with your banker because there's a finance contingency in this deal to understand where you're coming from on this. Because it makes no sense. I've never seen it in 25 years of business. So I get on the phone with the bank and I say, this is counterintuitive. You want customer concentration to stay below X, but you want revenues to stay above Y. And so from a buyer perspective, if when they get in and own the business, they're not going to turn business away from this customer, right? Because that would jeopardize their revenues. And if they do turn away business, the customer may leave, go somewhere else, and then that jeopardizes their loan with you. It doesn't make any sense. And he says, well, I'm open to options. Okay, this is what I wanted to hear. I'm open to options. He says, look, I thought about it, and I said, look, we understand your concern, and we talked to our client about the customer concentrations. But if revenues stay at X or increase, it shouldn't be a problem. If revenues go from 10 million to 20 million and customer concentration on that one customer goes from 30 to 40%, who cares? You're making more money, sales are up, you have plenty of coverage on your loans. But what I suggested was, let's lose the requirement that concentration of this business, this one customer, is part of the equation. I said, let's look at it in the following light. If revenues were to drop below X, okay, a 2-year average, let's give some room here. So if we have like a little bit of a bump in the road in year 1, but we make it up in year 2, you average the 2, we're still there, you're good, okay? Remember, they wanted all or nothing. If revenues drop below X, you lose it. If revenues stay way up here, but customer concentration is more than X, you lose the note. I said, let's make it dollar for dollar. So if we're a dollar short on the 2-year average, you take $1 off the note. If we're, $100,000, 100,000 short, you take 100,000 off the note, right? Make it equitable, dollar for dollar, 2-year average. Give the client, give the customer chance, because look, people put things on hold. People then pick it up in the following year. 2-year average is we felt was equitable. And again, this is the bank underwriting a transaction. So we're talking directly to the people putting the loan together. And they said that works for us. We can do that. So now we've had this conversation. Again, we've already had a conversation with our client about the original deal, which we said, absolutely not. Do not accept this. Your call, but our recommendation is do not accept it. That's where Osage, I believe, is different from some other firms. It's like, hey, here's the deal. You got to make it happen. Our response is no. If they want that, we should just terminate, move on, and find another buyer. So, but let's negotiate. So I went back to our client. We had a nice conversation with the 3 partners, their accounting firm, law firm, and everybody said, you know what, that works for us. We can do this. So we went back to the buyer. The buyer's excited. The bank's excited. Let's get this moving. We're ready to close. We want to get this going. Obviously, there's a few steps in between, including drafting the purchase agreement. But at the end of the day, I mean, the key aspect here is things will come up. They always come up in transactions. And if you're not properly represented in that transaction, the likelihood is that you may just step away from something that could be rectified through a conversation, through negotiation, having a third party, a representative like Osage do it for you. After 9 months of a year, just to walk away from a deal because it's unacceptable, which it is, but to look for an alternative. How can I make this work? How can I bridge that gap and get to a successful transaction is why you hire Osage. That's what we do. That's our expertise. That's why you get the deal done that works for you. Now, we haven't closed yet on this transaction. We still have things to work through, but we're over the initial humps, right? We got through the financial due diligence, operational due diligence. Now we're into legal and a few other employment agreements, things that we'll work through. But the point I'm making here is that you need to be represented in a transaction. Again, my name's kdee, President of Osage Advisors. Appreciate you being with us today. This week's Big Hurdle. If you enjoyed this episode, you can click below some other episodes and similar topics, and have a great day.